Dead man walking?
Squealing.
So we're going to talk about this concept of God being made sin for us. He who had no sin became sin for us. Now, ever since the beginning of time, when God created the heavens and the earth, and all that's in it, and on the sixth day, He created male and female, and He gave them one rule. Just one. And He says, you listen to this rule, and you'll live. But if you don't listen to this rule, then you're going to die. What was that rule?
Don't eat the fruit.
Don't eat the fruit. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, why would anybody want to have knowledge of, I can understand good, but why would you want to understand evil? Can you imagine, before the fall, there was only good. There was no evil at all. But why would, I don't know, maybe it was going through her mind, well, what is evil? I want to know what evil is. Was it that? I want to know what is good. Well, if good was all there was, good is good, and that's all that was, why would she be asking, that she wanted knowledge of what it was like to be good? But somehow God gave this rule. It says, do not eat from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden. One rule. And on her own, she just decided to eat of it, right?
No.
No. You mean she had help?
Yep.
Okay, who was that?
Same.
Serpent, right? And he, remember, he was the angel of light at one time, right? The Lucifer, the morning star. They say that he had the highest position in heaven. And he wanted more than he had already. And that's why, we say pride goes before the fall. Well, he says, I want to ascend on high. I don't even want to be equal to God. I want to be over God. I want to be greater than God. I want God to bow down before me. And so he goes there and tempts Eve. And what does Eve do? She gives in to the temptation. Now some people will say, well, why in the world did God make it that way? If he's God, then he could have done something different so that she wouldn't make a mistake. Well, we know that what happened was after she ate of it, she didn't only own that sin for herself. They say that misery likes company, right? So she had to find somebody to be miserable with her, right? And so she turns to Adam, who was right there, by the way. Nowhere in Scripture do I see that Adam says, no, Eve, God told us not to do this, so we shouldn't do this. He could have, but he didn't. Instead, when Eve offered it to him, he says, well, the woman must know better than I, so I'm going to experience what she has experienced, right? Well, did they die?
Yes. No.
Not right away.
No.
But God created us to live forever, but because of one sin, one disobedience, one separation from the perfectness that God created for us to be, one is all it took for there to be a death, spiritual death. And because of that spiritual death, the concept of living forever now will not take place. And all through history, we see Satan tempting people over and over again to buy into the lie that they can become God. So if there's anybody out there, any religion that tries to tell you that all you have to do is experience your innermost self and you can become a God. Hear that hissing of a snake. Satan knows that he blew it from the beginning. And again, misery likes company, so he's going to try and take as many as he can with him to the grave. Isaiah 53. Now this is way before Christ was born even on earth. It says, who has believed our report, and to whom the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground, and has no stately form or majesty that we should look on him, nor an appearance that we would take pleasure in him. He's talking about the exterior, like sometimes even a guy will know a good-looking guy, and a woman knows, of course, a good-looking man. But Jesus was maybe had a form of being an ordinary person. Nothing that would turn someone's head and say, well, he's a good-looking person. Just an ordinary man to do extraordinary things. He was despised and abandoned by men, a man of great pain, and familiar with sickness. You know, when I hear people say, well, God just doesn't understand what I'm going through. Have you heard that before? Or why would God cause all these disasters to come upon this world? Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, fire, blizzards, disasters, and war. Yeah. I mean, how many of you ever watched the news recently about what's going on in Ukraine? I mean, it's hard to fathom that here in this modern day and age that there would be devastation of war like we see in Ukraine right now, with the bodies lying all over the ground, and they having to dig mass graves to bury all these people. Sad. And I hear people saying, where is God when all this is happening? Man, if you think that you are experiencing grief, you just don't know the heart of God. Can you imagine what God sees when He does see every single person out there that dies? How that must break the heart of God. And like one whom people hide their faces, He was despised, and we had no regard for Him. However, it was our sicknesses that He Himself bore, and our pains that He carried. Yet we ourselves assumed that He had been afflicted, struck down by God, and humiliated. Now, again, when we watch the Passion and we see what they did, and here, I think Mel Gibson did a great job in portraying God's determination to carry out His plan through Jesus. Where even though a lot of the whippings that He got, most people would have died from just the lashes, the cat's of nine tail that ripped open His flesh. So His muscles and His bones were exposed, and the amount of loss of blood, they would have died. Yet He was determined to carry on His plan This is the reason that I came to this earth, is to show my love for every person that has ever lived, that lived at that time, or ever will live. I am dying to take away everyone's sin and place it upon myself so that death will no longer have power over anyone who will trust in the Lord. Wow. He was pierced for our offenses. He was crushed for our wrongdoings. The punishment for our well-being was laid upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. But the Lord has caused the wrongdoing of us all to fall upon him. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before shears, so he did not open his mouth. You know, when I was watching the Passion and how Pilate is questioning him, and Pilate thinks he has all the authority, over Jesus, and Jesus responds, you have no authority over anyone except that God gives it to you. Wow. God permitted evil to happen to Jesus because his love was so great. And yet we want to take it for granted. Like a sheep that is silent before shears, he did not open his mouth. He didn't retaliate. He just spoke truth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation who considered that he was cut off from the land of the living for the wrongdoing of my people, to whom the blows due. And his grave was assigned with wicked men, yet he was with a rich man in his death. Now this is way before Jesus' time, right? It was written. Yet we know that Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man, allowed Jesus to be born, to be placed, and to be buried in his tomb. Prophecy fulfilled. Because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. But the Lord desired to crush him, causing him grief if he renders himself as a guilt offering. He will see his offspring, he will prolong his days, and the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his hand. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied. By his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, for he will bear their wrongdoings. Therefore I will allot him a portion with the greedy, and he will divide the plunder with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was counted with the wrongdoers. I like also the part where Pilate says, it's a custom that we release a criminal. And so he says, thinking that people would, of course, pick Jesus to be released over Barabbas. And because evil is so evil, someone says, give us Barabbas. And then the two that was crucified alongside him on the cross were criminals. One just says, hey, if you're a son of God, you can save us and stop this all from happening. And the other one says, you know what, we deserve this. This man didn't deserve this. And he says, Lord, remember me. He placed his faith that this person that was dying for his sin. And this person was going to pay the penalty for his sin. He says, Lord, remember me when you go to paradise. And Jesus said, you will. Today you will be with me in paradise. Yet he himself bore the sin of many and interceded for the wrongdoers. When I think about the awesome price that Christ paid for each and every one of us, a price that we don't deserve, I think sometimes we forget. Because we tend to, because of our human minds, remember all the bad things that we have done in our lives. In fact, maybe some of you are thinking of something that you just, maybe some stupid thing that you did. You just think, how can God forgive me for what I did? And God's over there saying, what are you talking about? Remember that one movie with the little black kid goes, what you talking about? God said, what you talking about? Because he does not see your sin. Jesus is the one that says, I paid for that. And it says that he will remember your sin no more. For we know that if our earthly tent, our bodies, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house that not made by hands, eternal in the heavens. For indeed, in this tent we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven. Since in fact, after putting it on, we will not be found naked. For indeed, we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, because we do not want to be unclothed, but to be clothed. So that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life. I mean, how many of you, when you're experiencing pain, grief, agony, wish that you didn't have to experience that anymore, huh? Julie? You know what I'm talking about? Don? You know, someday soon you won't have to carry oxygen around. And someday you're gonna probably look a lot younger than you are. Because we're gonna have a new body. Wow. What glorious day that's gonna be. What is mortal will be swallowed up by life. What is something that we know for a fact that if Jesus doesn't come soon and we die, this mortal body will go to the ground. And like it says, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. From the dirt we came out, and the dirt will return. But God has a better plan for us to receive a new body, a new heaven, and a new earth. Now he who prepared us for this very purpose is God, who gave us the Spirit as a pledge. Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight, but we are of good courage, and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be home with the Lord. Therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether we are at home or absent, to be pleasing to Him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive compensation for his deeds done through the body in accordance with what he has done, whether good or bad. We're going to get compensated for what we do in the body. Therefore, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade people. But we are well known to God, and I hope that we are also well known in your consciousness. We are not condemning ourselves to you again, but are giving you an opportunity to be proud of us, so that you will have an answer for those who take pride in appearance and not in heart.